Greetings, class. Welcome to another session here in second language teaching. We're going to be focusing in this session on being a teacher of language studies, and we're going to be focusing on task-based interaction. The normal vernacular in the world of teaching second language would be task-based language teaching. Taking some of the ideas out of Brown's textbook here, not a textbook, but Brown's book on teaching reading, listening, and speaking to second language learners. I'm going to give you some information from other places as well, but let's get started here. We're going to do a little overview about why do task-based language teaching, talk a little bit about negotiation, the factors involved in negotiation, and how to teach tasks using for the purpose of doing negotiation. Task-based language teaching is nothing that is, well, it's not really new in a big sense. It's been around for about 15 years. There were several articles that came out. They started talking about the need for doing more than just communicative language teaching, that we needed to start focusing more on specific tasks, and that the tasks become the focus. Nation, he's going to be talking in the textbook about using task-based language teaching to focus students to do listening and speaking, and in particular the concept of negotiation. Negotiation is the idea that students don't understand a word or a concept, and so they need to negotiate meaning. They have to talk back and forth to try to figure out what it is that each other is saying, and thereby learn some new words and also learn to communicate. So they need to negotiate, although the focus of the conversation is not on learning language, but through their act of negotiating, through their act of trying to figure out what's going on and working together and helping each other learn type of thing, they learn language. Negotiation is very important with the regard to language learning. So in the realm of listening and speaking, you're going to have someone listening, you're going to have someone speaking, or vice versa, and part of that detail, part of that job there is going to entail the listener to be asking questions for clarification, for understanding, to ask them to repeat something so that they can get some form of understanding. It encourages negotiation through communication. So if you're in a classroom and you have a student telling a story, retelling a story that they have read, that's going to involve some type of negotiation, because the listener is going to say, stop, wait, what does this mean? I don't understand that. Can you say that again? And through that communication of negotiation, they're going to be able to get more feedback. It's also going to force feedback, because you're getting feedback, less focused feedback, less formalized feedback because of the negotiation going back and forth. And you can also get more formalized feedback from the listening and speaking negotiation that's going on. It also increases pushed output production, which we'll be talking about in another lesson here, but it's going to actually force people to take what they've learned already and put it into production. So that's also a very good thing. It's also going to increase, obviously, practice opportunities, because you're doing you're focusing on a particular task. And so that's the overview of task-based language teaching. There is actually a whole bunch more that we could talk about, and I'll probably be doing that in another series. Let's move on here and talk a little bit more about some of the things that they're doing in a task-based language teaching, and that's mainly negotiation. You're going to get negotiation for a variety of reasons. You're going to get negotiation also. You can get negotiation, have your students get involved in negotiation via some sort of input or some sort of information transfer. I'll talk a little bit about what those are. Again, as I said, not negotiation. Task-based language teaching is going to encourage negotiation. It's going to augment communication. They're going to be communicating more because they're trying to understand what's going on. It is in a controlled environment, so that's a good thing. You can also practice autonomous learning. Students are going to be sitting there, and their goal is to understand. So they're going to be negotiating for meaning. They're going to be using strategies to control the classroom, to control the conversation, to ask for a meaning, ask for clarification, try to figure out what a word or phrase means. They're going to be also learning how to interrupt, how to ask a question, how to control the conversation, not let the other person continue. For example, they do that in ways that are obviously polite, but ways that won't the ways that will enable the learner not to be overrun by the conversation that's going on. So it's very good that they're going to be learning these autonomous learning skills and strategies. You're also going to be able to practice with extended communication. Typically in a classroom, you have students talking to each other, and maybe it's a script or it's a modified script. If they can learn the skills of negotiating for meaning and the skills and strategies for controlling a conversation, they can have extended communication activities. So you can deal with things that are larger, that are unplanned, and students can practice with them because they're practicing with those autonomous learning tools. In addition, you can have some authentic input. Nation talks about giving a student a Dear Abby type of article. A Dear Abby article is where someone writes in the newspaper, Dear Abby, I have this problem. I don't know what to do. Can you help me? And the students try to answer that. They try to fill in this information. There are other ways that you can have extended conversations with authentic materials. You can talk about, the 5 best restaurants in the local area, and then they have to rank them. You're dealing with students who are now sitting in a group, and they're explaining, no, this is the better restaurant, no, this is the better restaurant, and why. And they have to, again, have some cooperative learning going on here, maybe some negotiation of meaning, but there's definitely going to be some back and forth that's going on there. Text also talked about some gap filling. These are activities where you have 2 lists or you have 2 maps, and each map it's the same location or it's the same list, but on this map, points 1, 2, 4, and 7 are missing, and on this map, 1, 5, 6, and 9 are missing, and you need to communicate with one another to get everything on your list. And so you're trying to transfer some idea, some information back and forth. You can also use things like commercials, and the one that I often used when I was teaching was one of the Apple commercials, which was Think Different. It was an excellent commercial. It was only about 30 seconds long. It included all of these famous people, and it encouraged people to think out of the box, to do things differently. And so let's just say there were 10 people in this commercial. Who were they? They had to go look that up. They could talk about them. Then they had to rank them. Who was the most important in the list? And they had to rank them together, as in pairs. And they had to figure out which one was better. Was the guy who created the Muppets, his name doesn't come to me right now, or was it Picasso? Or was it Henry Ford? Who was ranked number 1 and why? And they had to negotiate. They had to discuss back and forth with this. And then I took this commercial and we said, okay, who would you add to it? Who's not on that list that you would add to it? For example, would you add Steve Jobs to that list? Would you add, Alexander Graham Bell? He was too old for pictures when they put this on, but would you add him to that list? Who would you take off the list? And so there was that whole thing that was going on that we could do as well. Now they're doing, again, more negotiating and more ranking, just like a Nation was suggesting. You could use the Proverbs, which is activities that I created that try to focus on extended communication, gap filling, and also ranking and the like. Just show you an example of what I mean. Here was an activity that I created using one of the Proverbs out of the Old Testament. And this was my basic first question. Select from the list of things what you would do to build a house. So now they have to take these things. Okay, what are the things that I need to build a house? And they can add their own. I left a space here and they can add more. But now they're working by themselves and they're deciding, what am I going to need? All right, then they need to rank these things. They're going to rank these, top 10 things, and then they're going to talk with their partners and discuss what things, why is this more important than that? And so now they're having this, again, negotiation of meaning, first of all, and then they're talking about the ranking of this, the logic of it, and why this is more necessary or that is more necessary. And, someone might at some point say, well, I may not have land, but if I have money, I can get land, and they can start learning about things like that. And then, of course, what happens if you don't have money? And so what are the things that are more necessary? I then have them do it again. Use the same words from above, only now what do I use to make a company? What do I need to build a company? And then, again, rank these items, explain their answers. So we're going through this process again, only it's a different thing now. Are they different? Are they the same? Why? Why not? What have you learned? Okay? Now, all of that is your gap fill, your ranking, your negotiation of meaning, extended conversation, and then I bring in the proverb. And this is right out of the book of Proverbs 24. By wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established, right? Through knowledge its rooms are filled with many beautiful and rare treasures. Well, look in here. I have two words that I put in here that aren't normal. Knowledge and wisdom. And it's interesting to see where students put this in their list, okay? But then they look at this and they say, and they want to try to explain the meaning, okay? And again, they're going to try to do this together. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm trying to figure out this passage is. Now, I have other pieces here to this. I had a vocabulary fill-in-the-blank type of thing. But then I had other things. Okay, if a house is really built by wisdom, how does one get wisdom? Okay, and they had to do brainstorm and organize. How do I get wisdom? Okay, when they have to think about this, they're brainstorming. This is all a talking type of activity. They're talking within their pairs or within their groups. They could also say, why do you agree or disagree? And they're supposed to be talking. They're interviewing each other type of thing. Cite some example of a house that was built on wisdom or a house that was destroyed for lack of wisdom. Okay, the benefits of having wisdom. These are just some of the extended things, the production that, as I called it, that students could do. The whole point being here that I'm using a task to help them learn and focus on language, and it does include things like negotiation, like your conversation controlling strategies, just like Nation was a suggestion. So there are a lot of good things that are out there that you can use. Some negotiation factors, some I've already talked about. One is working in pairs. Working in pairs is a great way to get people to, again, negotiate, to get involved with trying to understand what's going on. There's nobody else there but you and your partner, so you have to work with them. Nation talks about cooperating tasks, trying to do things that require you to work together. Don't know that I necessarily agree with that. Earlier, I was telling you about an activity where we were trying to rank the top 10 people in the commercial that I had showed the students, about being your best. And then I asked them, okay, since we can look at this and see these people and throughout our invention history and what they did, what if we looked into the Bible and we wanted to rank people who were in the Bible? Who would you rank as the top 10 and why? And it was interesting that you had people starting to disagree with one another. One was trying to defend why this is this and why that is that. And so it wasn't necessarily cooperating because they had to work together to create a list of 10, but they had different ideas. So it was there was conflict that was there. And it was good because it furthered their desire to want to communicate. So they were communicating, but again, their focus was not on language learning. Modified learner output. That's something that you as a teacher or a monitor wants to be looking for. You hear a problem that a student has and you hear that they get corrected somewhere along the line or that they monitor a correction and then you hear that correction. You can now start checking these things off. Okay, this student is now doing this properly, right? They've noticed a change or you've noticed a change. They have noticed a difference. And because there was noticing going on, now there's going to be changes. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking for as we watch our students negotiate and learn. Right, negotiation via learner training. And really what Nation is trying to express here is the fact that we need to teach our students. We need to train them how to negotiate in a conversation. If you don't know the rules for controlling the conversation, you can get lost. You can get overwhelmed. And so you as a teacher need to teach your students, don't allow anybody else to control the conversation. You control the conversation because you're the weakest link. So you need to learn how to ask a question, how to stop a conversation, how to politely request for more information, that type of thing. You need to give them those phrases like, excuse me, pardon me, can you hold on for a minute? Teach them those phrases so that they can say, okay, hold on, wait a minute, can you wait a minute, please? Maybe even some of the gestures like I'm trying to show you right here. But you're going to give them or show them, have them practice with those questions so they can then ask them, I don't understand what you mean by A. Can you repeat that? Can you say that again, please? And once they learn those tools, those tips, they're going to have better control over negotiating what's going on in the conversation. You'll want to give them interview practice. And you can want to have this, sometimes where students, their levels are the same, sometimes where they're not the same, so that they can practice in a variety of situations and scenarios. So you want to give them interview practice. The next example that Nation talked about was not interview practice, but forcing the teacher, where the teacher makes a deliberate mistake and they have to force the teacher to stop. All right, so a teacher, he starts talking and he talks about, and then the next thing that you want to do is, now the teacher deliberately makes a mistake or deliberately makes something difficult so that they don't understand, and it's their job now to force the teacher to stop. I think it's a great activity because a lot of people are shy. They're intimidated because they don't know the language. Okay, you now have to, if they don't force you to stop, you're not going to get that information. Okay, put that information on a quiz or whatever it is. The goal, of course, is to get them to interact, right? Forcing the teacher to stop. Other things that you can do as far as training is to do some recording. You record a pair as they're talking, and you then review it with them and review what they did, what was good, what was bad about their negotiation, about their controlling tips and techniques. You can also assign particular roles. You have this role. A person who's probably very good at taking notes or very good at listening isn't very good at talking. Well, okay, from now on, I'm assigning you the role of the speaker. You have to talk. And now you're going to be forcing them to try to stretch and grow. And then information gaps, which you've already talked about, is a way to try to monitor and limit and focus what it is these students are going to be looking for. They need to be trained, and that's the important point of this slide right here. They need to learn what these phrases are, what these strategies are, so that they can control a conversation, so that they can understand the procedures necessary to be able to negotiate. And that's the big thing there. There's also non-negotiated interaction. According to Nation, the majority of what we do by learning through text or material is to guess with contextual clues. So we may not know everything that's there. We have to guess from the context, and there's certainly one way that we can do that. We can practice with known data. We can have certain information and try to get some interaction there, but it's non-negotiated. We actually know what the stuff means, right? For example, a find the difference activity. You've ever seen two pictures that are side by side and you're trying to find the difference type of thing. Well, you can do that with two groups of materials and you're trying to find the difference. Finally, Nation talks about some reasons why people do not interact, and we have to deal with all of them. One reason is that they simply don't have the diction. They don't have the lexicon. They don't have the vocabulary. They need at least 1,000 words just to get started. And so you want to obviously build that up if it's low. They don't have control over their syntax. You've got to start dealing with the basic syntax, and then you want to move up. They may not have control over their fluency. They may know a lot of vocabulary. They may know a lot of the rules of the language, but if they don't have the fluency practice, they don't have the ability to put this all together and push it into your autonomous language use, they're going to have difficulty. Some just need encouragement. And in my opinion, the major part of my job as an ESL teacher is to encourage students, is to get students to not believe the lie that they can't do it. And there are many students who actually believe they can't do it. Because they believe they can't do it, of course, the self-fulfilling prophecy. And so my goal is to encourage them, to show them that they can do it. And I can give you countless examples of people who were afraid to speak, people who didn't think that they could do it, and I encouraged them by either the stick or the carrot to go out and try. And again, I've had several students where you have to push them off the diving board. Make them go do a speech. Obviously, you give them as much support and scaffolding as possible beforehand, but you make them go do the speech, and when they're done, they're like, that was awesome, and they want more. So encouragement is a big thing. And then, of course, you have shy students, and that's a harder thing to deal with. Any number of ways to work with that. Again, the carrot and the stick are just some of the ideas. Of course, it's going to be up to the student how high or how quickly their affective filter goes up. Okay, and that's all for this section here on task-based language.
teaching or task-based interaction. I will have another one of these that's going to be a little more detailed as far as what types of things you do with task-based language teaching beyond just speaking and listening. Have a nice day now, and I'll talk